My stepmother used my father's money to send me to a psychiatric facility. She told everyone she's lost it. I sat there calmly and said, "So why did I record your entire plan?" The nurse pressed play. Her face twisted in horror as the audio filled the room. "My name is Serena Calloway, and I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. If you've never been there, picture a postcard-perfect southern town, cobblestone streets, grand old houses with wraparound porches, and the smell of salt water and magnolia in the air. My father, Dr. Richard Calloway, was one of the best heart surgeons in the state. People respected him. I worshipped him. My mother died when I was 10. Car accident. It was just me and my dad after that, and we were close. Really close. He worked long hours, but when he was home, he was mine. We had inside jokes, movie nights, and long talks over pancakes on Saturday mornings. Then came Madeline Dupree. I remember the first time I met her. My dad had taken me out to dinner at a fancy waterfront restaurant, and I was excited because it had been a while since we had a father-daughter night. But then, halfway through my spaghetti, he cleared his throat and said, "Sweetheart, there's someone I want you to meet." And in walked her. Tall, blonde, perfectly put together. The kind of woman who never had a hair out of place. She had a smile that could fool anyone except me. I was polite, of course. I was 15, not a toddler throwing a tantrum. But even at that age, I knew. Something about the way she looked at me, the way she spoke, too careful, too rehearsed. It set me on edge. Still, my father was happy, so I tried. I really did. When they got married a year later, I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she wasn't as cold as she seemed. Maybe she'd grow on me. She didn't. But that didn't matter. My dad loved her. And then, just a few years later, he got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. They caught it too late. Too damn late. And that's when everything changed. The night my father died, the house was full of people. Family, friends, neighbors, all offering condolences that felt as empty as the air in the room. I sat on the staircase, my arms wrapped around myself, listening to the murmurs of voices blending together. Such a tragedy. She's so young to lose both parents. At least Madeline will take care of her. That one made me laugh. A bitter, humorless sound. Because I knew better. The funeral was a blur. The lawyer's reading of my father's was not. I expected my father to leave Madeline something, of course. Maybe the house, maybe some money, but not everything. And he didn't. He left it all to me. The house, the savings, the assets. But because I was only 20, Madeline was given control of the estate until I turned 25. A legal technicality. A 5-year gap. And that was all she needed. At first, she played the grieving widow role perfectly. She wore black for months, barely touched her food, spoke in a soft, fragile voice that made people fawn over her. But behind closed doors, things started shifting. First, little things. She got rid of my father's car, saying it was too painful to see it in the driveway. Then she sold off some of his watches. Then bigger things. She fired the housekeeper who had worked for our family for years, replaced her with a younger woman who seemed more like Madeline's personal assistant than anything else. And then came the bank withdrawals. I noticed them one night when I couldn't sleep. I had been going through some of my dad's old files on his office computer when I saw the bank statements. Madeline was taking thousands from my father's accounts. I confronted her the next morning in the kitchen. "Why are you taking money from Dad's accounts?" I asked, my voice sharp. Madeline looked up from her coffee cup, unfazed. "Excuse me?" I shoved the printed statements onto the counter. "This? You're pulling out money. Way more than you should be. Where's it going?" She took a slow sip of coffee, then sighed dramatically. "Serena, you're upset. I get it. Losing a parent is hard. That's not an answer." She placed her mug down carefully, as if choosing her next words like chess pieces. Then she smiled, a tight, patient thing. "Sweetheart, I know you're struggling with all of this. Maybe you should see someone. A therapist, perhaps." And just like that, the seed was planted. It started small. Things disappearing, my keys, my phone, important documents. At first, I thought I was just being forgetful. Grief does that, right? Then it got worse. I'd hear noises at night. My bedroom door unlocked when I knew I'd locked it. Whispers when no one was around. Then, one morning, I woke up to my aunt and uncle standing over my bed. "Serena," my Aunt Margot said gently, "we're worried about you. You need help." I sat up, my pulse hammering. "What are you talking about?" Madeline stepped forward, sighing. "Sweetheart, you've been having episodes. You don't eat. You don't sleep. You scream in the middle of the night. You've been seeing things that aren't there." I felt my stomach drop. "That's not true." I protested. My uncle, James, shook his head. "Madeline showed us everything. The messages, the erratic behavior. Serena, we love you. We just want you to get better." And just like that, they had me committed. I screamed, I begged, I fought. But the doctors nodded sympathetically and told me I was having a manic episode. And Madeline? She signed the papers so quickly. I spent 6 months locked away in a psychiatric facility in Atlanta. Madeline had won. She had everything now, control of my father's estate, my home, my money. and I was exactly where she wanted me. But what she didn't know, I had planned ahead. I had recorded everything. And when I got the chance, when a sympathetic nurse gave me access to a phone, I made sure the truth came out. In the moment the recording played and Madeline's voice filled the room, boasting about how easy it was to make me disappear, her face twisted in horror. She opened her mouth, but this time, she had nothing to say, because she knew she was finished, and I was about to get my life back. The moment Madeline's voice filled the room, everything changed. I sat there in the small, windowless office, my hands gripping the arms of my chair so tightly my nails dug into the fabric. Across from me, Dr. Harrington, the head psychiatrist, stared at the recording device on the desk, his normally impassive face betraying something close to shock. The audio played clearly, filling the silent room with Madeline's voice. Cold, smug, calculated. She's young, naive, and grieving. It's easy. You just make them doubt themselves. By the time they realize what's happening, it's already too late. The recording continued. She'll fight it at first, of course. But grief makes people unpredictable. All I have to do is push her in the right direction, and she'll unravel on her own. People will believe what they want to believe. And a grieving girl losing her mind? That's a story everyone will eat up. I glanced up at Madeline. For the first time since this nightmare began, she wasn't in control. Her face had drained of all color, her mouth slightly open as if she wanted to interrupt, to stop this before it got any worse. But it was too late for that. Nurse Lydia, the one who had helped me, stood by the door with her arms crossed. Her expression was unreadable, but I could see the way her fingers twitched slightly against her scrubs, the only sign of her shock. Dr. Harrington reached forward and stopped the recording. Silence stretched between us. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, the distant murmur of nurses and patients beyond the office door. Finally, the doctor exhaled, pressing his fingers together as he turned to Madeline. "Mrs. Calloway," he said slowly, his voice dangerously calm. "Would you care to explain this?" Madeline blinked, her lips parting, but no sound came out. I had never seen her at a loss for words before. I almost smiled. "This is obviously fake," she blurted out suddenly, her voice high-pitched. "Anyone can manipulate audio. Who knows what kind of delusion Serena has been having? She's clearly unwell." Dr. Harrington arched an eyebrow. "Mrs. Calloway, this does not sound manipulated." Madeline let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. "Doctor, please. I know Serena is upset, but you've seen her behavior. You told me yourself how unstable she's been." Dr. Harrington didn't respond right away. He just studied her, and then he turned to me. "Serena," he said, "where did you get this recording?" I swallowed, my throat dry. "I recorded her before I was brought here. I had a feeling she was up to something. I saved copies online, sent them to a lawyer, just in case." Madeline inhaled sharply, whipping her head toward me. "You little—" Dr. Harrington held up a hand. "That's enough, Mrs. Calloway." Madeline closed her mouth so fast I thought she might bite her tongue. The air in the room had shifted. The power was no longer in her hands. For 6 months, I had been dismissed, labeled unstable, treated like some poor, broken girl who didn't know what was real and what wasn't. But now the truth was sitting on that desk, undeniable and damning. Dr. Harrington picked up his phone. "I think we need to make a few calls." Madeline didn't leave quietly. As the staff escorted her out of the office, she twisted around to look at me, her face burning with fury. "You think this is over?" she hissed under her breath. "You have no idea what you've just done." For the first time in 6 months, I lifted my chin and met her gaze with a calm, steady stare. "Neither do you." She glared at me one last time before turning away, her footsteps sharp against the linoleum floor as she stormed down the hall. I exhaled. It wasn't over yet. Not even close. The door shut behind her with a final, satisfying click, and for the first time in 6 months, I felt like I could breathe. Dr. Harrington leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled together as he exhaled through his nose. The man had spent half a year convinced I was mentally unstable. Now he was staring at the hard evidence that proved otherwise. "Serena," he said, his voice carefully measured, "this is a serious allegation. If what you're saying is true—" I cut him off, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "It's true." He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then he turned to Nurse Lydia. "Lydia, I'd like you to contact the board and notify the legal team. I want this looked into immediately." Lydia nodded, giving me a quick glance before stepping out of the room. Madeline was gone, but I wasn't naive enough to think this was over. Because Madeline wasn't just cruel. She was careful, and she still had connections. I knew how this worked. If she could twist the truth before, she could do it again. She wouldn't just sit back and let the truth destroy her. No, she was going to fight. I was kept in the facility for another 3 days while the legal team reviewed the case. It was torture. Every second I spent locked inside that place was another second Madeline had to cover her tracks, to spread whatever new lies she needed to keep herself safe. I spent my time waiting, watching, but most of all, preparing, because I had more than just the recording. On the third day, I was called back into Dr. Harrington's office. When I walked in, I wasn't alone. Sitting across from the doctor was a man in a navy suit, sharp and professional. A lawyer, I realized instantly. And, standing in the corner of the room, Detective Paul Grayson. I barely knew him, but I recognized him from back home in Charleston. He had handled a few fraud cases before, mostly high-end financial crimes, nothing that ever made front-page news. But the fact that he was here, that meant something. He nodded at me. Serena. I sat down slowly, my hands clenched in my lap. Dr. Harrington cleared his throat. Serena, this is Mr. Reynolds, an attorney for the facility, and Detective Grayson. We've reviewed the evidence, and there are some things we need to discuss. I swallowed. Go on. Grayson adjusted his jacket before leaning forward. I listened to your recording. I waited, heart hammering. It's damning, no doubt. But audio alone isn't enough to get a conviction. We need more. I exhaled sharply. I have more. All three men in the room stilled. Reynolds lifted a brow. You do? I nodded. I've been waiting for this moment. Before I was brought here, I started noticing things. Documents missing. Money moving around. So I started collecting proof. I sent emails to myself with screenshots of my father's bank records. I took photos of the transactions. I even managed to grab a few printed statements before Madeline locked me out of the accounts. Grayson's eyes darkened. And where are these now? I met his gaze. On a secure drive. And in the hands of a lawyer I hired before I was committed. Reynolds let out a low whistle, shaking his head. You planned ahead. I said quietly. Dr. Harrington, who had been silent until now, rubbed his temple. Serena, if what you're saying is true, it is. Then your stepmother didn't just manipulate the legal system, he continued, ignoring my interruption. She committed fraud, financial theft, and possibly even medical deception. She bribed someone here, I said. She had to. There's no way she got me committed without some kind of pull inside this facility. Grayson nodded. We're already looking into it. I inhaled deeply. It wasn't over. Not yet. But I could feel it. The walls that had kept me trapped for 6 months, they were finally starting to crack. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in my sterile, white-walled room, staring up at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought about my father, the way he used to laugh, how warm his voice was when he'd tell me stories before bed. I thought about how, if he were alive, none of this would have ever happened. And then I thought about Madeline. What was she doing right now? Was she panicking? Coming up with some new lie to twist everything back in her favor? She wouldn't go down without a fight. I knew that much. But she didn't know something, either. Neither would I. The next morning, the staff was different. The usual nurses weren't there. The head orderly who always supervised meals? Nowhere to be found. And Dr. Harrington? He looked tense when he came to see me. Serena, he said, his voice quieter than usual. There's been a development. I tensed. What kind of development? He exhaled slowly. Madeline lawyered up. Of course she did. She's denying everything, he continued. Claiming you edited the audio, that you've been unstable for years. She says your father was worried about your mental health before he passed, that he wanted you to get help. A sharp, burning anger flared inside me. That's a lie. I know, he said, but she's building a case. And unfortunately, she has resources. I gritted my teeth. So do I. Dr. Harrington hesitated. There's more. I stiffened. We believe she's trying to leave the country. My breath caught in my throat. She's moving money around, closing accounts. We don't know where she's planning to go, but if she gets out of the U.S., this becomes a whole different game. My stomach twisted. I couldn't let that happen. Madeline had spent months making sure no one believed me. Now was my turn. I sat up straighter, my jaw tight. Then we need to stop her. Dr. Harrington nodded. Detective Grayson is already working on it. But Serena, this isn't just about clearing your name anymore. If we don't act fast, she might disappear for good. I clenched my fists. Not if I had anything to say about it. I barely heard Dr. Harrington after that. My mind was already racing, spinning through every possible way this could go. Madeline was running. Of course she was. She must have realized the second she left this facility that the walls were closing in on her. She wasn't stupid. She knew that if she stayed, if she waited for the system to work, she would lose. So she did what she did best. She controlled the narrative. She was likely out there right now, spinning another story, telling anyone who would listen that I was sick, that I was delusional, that she was being persecuted for trying to help me. And worse, people would believe her, because that's what people do. They believe the easiest version of the truth, the one that makes them the most comfortable. By the afternoon, Detective Grayson was back. I was escorted to a private meeting room, where he sat at the table, flipping through a stack of documents. He looked up when I walked in, motioning for me to take a seat. We got a problem. I clenched my jaw. What kind of problem? Grayson sighed, rubbing his forehead. She's moving fast. faster than we anticipated. He tossed a document across the table. She withdrew another 200 grand this morning, transferred it to an offshore account. I felt my stomach drop. That means she's getting ready to disappear. Grayson nodded grimly. The good news? We flagged her passport. She can't legally leave the country. And the bad news? He hesitated. She might not need to. I frowned. What do you mean? He exhaled. Madeline is connected. She has people. If she wants to vanish, she doesn't need a passport. She just needs money and the right people to get her out. I gritted my teeth. Then we need to stop her before that happens. We're working on it. Work faster. Grayson cracked a small smile at that. You got fire, I'll give you that. I've got justice, I muttered. Or at least, I will. For the next few days, everything was a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and waiting. So much waiting. I was still stuck inside the facility, though I could feel the atmosphere shifting. The nurses no longer looked at me with wary pity. Some actually smiled at me now. Lydia would stop by my room just to check in, no longer speaking to me in that careful, measured tone she had used for months. People were starting to realize I wasn't crazy. I never had been. And Madeline? She was about to lose everything. The real breakthrough came when someone unexpected stepped forward. It was Victoria Langley. I hadn't heard that name in years. She was my father's old secretary, back when he ran his own private practice. She had worked for him for nearly a decade, a sweet woman in her 50s with sharp brown eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She had always liked me. I remember the way she used to sneak me candy from the receptionist's desk when I visited my dad's office after school. So when I got the news that she had reached out to the authorities with evidence, I knew it was big. Grayson came to see me the moment he got off the phone with her. Serena, we just got a statement from Victoria Langley. I sat up straighter, and she just handed us everything. Grayson placed a thick file onto the table between us. Turns out, Victoria kept records. Your father had her handle his financials, and when she started noticing some discrepancies after his death, she started saving them. I reached for the file with shaky hands, flipping it open. Inside were pages and pages of bank statements, emails, and handwritten notes. It was all there. The missing money, the transfers, the emails between Madeline and an unknown recipient discussing how to expedite Serena's psychiatric commitment. I swallowed hard, my hands gripping the edge of the paper. This was it. This was the smoking gun. Victoria says she never trusted Madeline. Grayson continued. She always felt like something was off. So she started documenting things just in case. But by the time she pieced it all together, you were already in the facility and she didn't know what to do. She was scared. Scared of what? Grayson gave me a pointed look. Scared of what Madeline might do to her, too. A chill ran down my spine. Because that was a very real fear. With Victoria's evidence, the case against Madeline became undeniable. Fraud, medical deception, financial abuse, possibly even conspiracy. The only problem? She was still out there, still moving, still scheming. And the longer she remained free, the more dangerous this game became. I wasn't stupid. I knew Madeline wouldn't go down easily. She had already proven how far she was willing to go to get rid of me. And now she had everything to lose, which meant there was only one thing left for her to do. Eliminate the threat. Madeline had backed me into a corner once. Now it was my turn. With Victoria Langley's evidence, we had everything we needed to bring her down. But knowing Madeline, she would still try to weasel her way out. She was too smart to sit back and let herself be destroyed. And that's exactly why we had to make sure there was nowhere left for her to run. Detective Grayson worked fast. By the next morning, a full investigation was launched. Subpoenas were issued. Lawyers were brought in. My father's estate was put under emergency review. And most importantly, a warrant was put out for Madeline's arrest. For fraud. For financial abuse. For unlawful psychiatric commitment. She just didn't know it yet. I was officially discharged from the psychiatric facility that same day. For the first time in 6 months, I walked outside, feeling the warm air of Charleston on my skin again. I should have felt free. I wasn't. Not yet. Because Madeline was still out there. She had no idea that her little house of cards was collapsing around her. But she was about to find out. I knew where she'd be. Madeline wasn't stupid, but she was predictable. So instead of hiding out or laying low, she did exactly what I expected. She walked into my father's lawyer's office like she owned the place, probably thinking she could talk her way out of this mess before it even started. And I was waiting for her. She walked into the conference room with that same confident stride, the same smug expression she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. And then she saw me. Her entire body stilled. I watched as panic flashed across her face, just for a second. But Madeline was a professional liar. She smoothed it away almost instantly, schooling her features into a look of careful concern. "Serena," she said, a little too brightly. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here?" I was just about to sit down, Madeline. She hesitated. That was new. For the first time, she wasn't calling the shots. Finally, she moved across the room and lowered herself into the chair across from me. But I could tell She was calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew. So I gave her the answer. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. She watched, her eyes flicking from my face to the folder. "What's that?" she asked, her voice just a little too casual. I set it down on the table, flipping it open. Inside were copies of everything. The fraudulent withdrawals, the emails, the psychiatric paperwork with her signature all over it. And, of course, a printed transcript of her own damning words from the recording. I tapped a finger on the page. Recognize this? Madeline didn't move, didn't even breathe. But I saw it, the slight twitch in her jaw, the tiny, nearly imperceptible flicker of her fingers against the armrest of the chair. She was cornered. "You framed me," I said evenly. "You stole my father's money, and you locked me away so no one would stop you." She let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. "Sweetheart, you've been through a lot. I know you think, stop." Her mouth snapped shut. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Madeline, you can lie to everyone else, but you don't get to lie to me anymore." She was silent. "The police know," I continued. "There's a warrant out for your arrest. The moment you step out of this building, you're done." Now, finally I saw it, the fear. She paled. Her eyes darted to the folder again, as if she could somehow erase what was in front of her. As if this wasn't already happening. "Asterisk," she started, but her voice caught in her throat. For once, she had nothing to say. I sat back, watching her squirm. And God, it felt so damn good. The next part happened fast. The moment she walked out of the office, 2 uniformed officers were waiting for her. She barely had time to react before the handcuffs were snapped around her wrists. She turned to me, her eyes wild, her carefully constructed mask finally shattering. "Serena," she hissed, "you don't understand. This is all a mistake." I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. Then I smiled. "No, Madeline," I said. "The mistake was thinking I wouldn't fight back." And then, I watched as they took her away. Madeline was convicted. Fraud, embezzlement, unlawful psychiatric commitment. The list went on and on. She lost everything. Her assets were seized. My father's estate was returned to me in full. And as for me, I got my life back. It took time. It took months of therapy, of rebuilding, of learning how to trust again. But I did it. And now, when people tell me family always has your back, I just smile. Because sometimes family is the first to put a knife there. But me? I made sure to take it back.